All right, we are here tonight to discuss on Left of the Projector the 1999 classic Kevin Smith film Dogma, and I have with me to discuss Mike from Turn Leftist podcast and Frank from Movies versus Capitalism. Thank you both for joining.
How's it
Thank you for
going?
having.
Yeah, of course. This is. I was telling Mike before we came on. I remember this movie being on like always on repeat on Comedy Central, and so I feel like I always would see parts of this movie, and I uncovered my DVD collection, which includes a copy of Dogma, which apparently I didn't know until maybe you told me, Frank, that it's like a collector's edition thing now.
I at least have that one collector's edition. I don't know if there were multiple editions that they issued, but I have the one that has like the really nice like illustrated artwork of the entire cast. Maybe there was an original release, but I was a proud citizen of the View Askew-diverse, so I collected a lot of that shit growing up.
Yeah, well, I think it's because Harvey Weinstein owns the movie rights, so they can't stream this on any service.
Is that
Okay.
why it
And
wasn't
the-
available?
And the reason for that not being available is because Disney didn't want to release it. And so Miramax, which I guess was owned by Harvey Weinstein, or he was the head, bought it and then released it, or took the rights and then released the movie. So Harvey Weinstein and they tried to buy it from him. And he's like, no, I'm not going to sell it to you because he's a piece of shit.
Sure. That's wild. I mean, that explains a lot. I've never encountered this in the modern era where I went to search for a movie on the TV and it was like, we just don't have it anywhere. I was like, I didn't know that could happen.
Yeah. It's on YouTube, surprisingly enough.
That's why I watched
like,
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all you
Which
can
is uncommon because usually they pull movies off YouTube. They're like, no, you can't have that on here. But I don't know. This movie is I always had great memories of this movie, and as not a Christian and not as a religious person, I don't know if I have the same viewing perspective. I don't know what you guys remember this movie and what your overall thoughts are.
Well, Mike, do you mind if I ask, were you raised Catholic or Christian or anything like that?
do. Yeah, Roman Catholic. How about you?
Same, dude.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
It's definitely
Jew
funnier in
here.
that case, right?
Yeah, I think some of the jokes hit a little bit closer to home in a really wonderful way. I mean, I know there were a ton of Catholics and Christians who were very, very angry when this movie came out.
Yeah, they delayed the movie, I think, almost a year because of all the protests for it.
I
Damn.
can see that. Yeah, I mean, you got to be really uptight in that sense, but like, yeah, Catholics are known for doing that. So,
Really? I thought we were like the chill ones.
no, the chillest ones, right?
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing, I was listening to Charlie Rose interview with Chris Rock and Kevin Smith. I don't remember which one of them mentioned. I think it was Kevin Smith saying that it sort of like undermines like the idea of religion if a movie like threatens your faith. And I think it's like kind of a perfect comment because like, oh, a movie is going to make people not take Catholicism seriously. How serious was your religion to begin with?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, like that'll be like that movie will be the thing that makes people not want to subscribe to Catholicism anymore.
they're like, oh, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, I'm done.
I mean, therein lies the paranoia, right? That's the whole thing that they're so scared about and why they get so amped up about anything that criticizes or what do you call it? Like just pokes fun at their religion because it will threaten to reveal that it all is just a farce. It's all just a bunch of shit they made up. But I mean, this movie in particular is great at doing that because I mean, the title, it's called Dogma, and it specifically goes after like tenets of religion and takes them both seriously and unseriously at the same time in a way that's like funny, but then also, of course, makes you seriously question your religion if you're somebody like, because I think a lot of people probably saw this. I don't think how old I was in '99, but definitely of the age where I would have been like coming out of religion, like a lapsed Catholic now. So it's like perfect for that age group of like teenagers who are like realizing that this was all bullshit foisted upon them and puts it in that light. But it's great. I mean, I think it's really clever, of course. I'm sure we're going to talk about all the ways that he takes it seriously and unseriously at the same time for like, what do you call it, purposes of the movie, like theatrical purposes, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, so 99 this came out, that I was 11. I probably didn't actually see this until like, I don't know, 12, 13. At whatever age that was when somebody. I'm from New Jersey as well, so I think we got to it earlier. Somebody was like, "Yo, we got to watch all the Kevin Smith movies," and I think at that time, like, his first 4 had come out: Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Dogma. So I remember seeing Dogma, must have been like 12, 13, Roman Catholic. I had already started kind of having like little bits of doubts in the church. I was like, these people aren't very nice to me when I show up. This doesn't feel like the place where God wants me to hang out. I remember seeing this movie and it just fucking blew my mind open. I was just like at that that sweet spot age where I was just like, wow, I didn't know you could think about all of these concepts and all of these, like he says in the movie, all these dogmatic structures in these different ways, and really like opened up my like perspective. So this is my favorite Kevin Smith movie, hands down.
So maybe that's why the Catholic Church was so afraid, like, teens and kids who, I mean, again, it's still a movie and still has its, comedic value. And one thing, actually, I don't know if you guys noticed this, I didn't notice until this last rewatch, was being that Kevin Smith is like a big comic book type. He loves comic books and comics. The movie this time felt kind of like it was structured almost like a comic book, with like the introduction of different characters, and then at the end they kind of all come together and you see like the action or whatever you want to call it at the end. It felt very comic booky, even though it's not at all. I don't think any of his other movies feel that way to me.
That's a really good, that's a really good observation. It's, I think, probably his most well-structured movie in the way that the plot and the story develops, and the way that characters are introduced, and the way that, I mean, it's kind of like there's also like a whodunit happening, underneath this, which is like actually pretty compelling, where like you're figuring it out as the characters are, right. And then you have this all these different characters get introduced, and the characters are so well written. I know they're broad, but like they're broad but specific at the same time. So like, I totally get that comic book comparison.
Would you guys say?
Okay,
just a quick question. Like, I'm not a huge Kevin Smith fan. I've only seen this one, Clerks, saw Clerks 2, and saw Mallrats. But those are like the only Kevin Smith movies I've seen. And even being from New Jersey myself, I was just never like a huge fan for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jersey represent. Finally, more on this podcast. We're taking over. But would you guys say that this is his smartest movie? Because to me, it feels like the smartest of the ones that I know of his. Like, it feels like he put the most thought into the script and like the concepts behind it, like we were saying. But yeah, I think that's why I liked it the best of all his that I've seen.
1,000,000%. Yes.
Easily the most smart. Actually, he wrote this before he wrote Clerks.
That's crazy.
What?
Yeah, he wrote this when he was pretty young, and then he didn't make it because he wanted to do it when he had more money for special effects.
Makes sense.
Which actually is almost more unbelievable, because Clerks, I feel like, is a more raw movie, whereas this is like a really, to have been this your first movie you wrote as a human.
Yeah,
it's pretty impressive.
I'm imagining he like did revisions.
As
he became a stronger writer and filmmaker.
I guess the idea, I should say, came about before. Yeah, I was saying to Mike before, is apparently like some of the drafts were more controversial as it went through, and they had to kind of like tone it down so that the protests would be a little less angry. And then actually I saw in the Charlie Rose interview or something that the archdiocese, or I don't know exactly what the name is, asked to come and see a screening of Dogma with Kevin Smith before it was released. And he claimed it was so that he could like prepare a statement for when like people would ask him about the movie. And really, he just wanted to see it.
It's funny.
I mean, that makes sense. They're doing Oppo research, they got, say what you will about the Catholic Church, they've got pretty good PR,
Yes. I think they've got that market cornered, although there's some cracks in that facade, I'd say.
Sure. Yeah, Mike, I would say that having seen pretty much all of Kevin Smith's movies, this is like far and away his most intelligent film. It's my favorite. I think it's his best. I think it is like the apex of what he was good at as a filmmaker, which is like incorporating these very, very wordy, like esoteric ideas and these monologues and all these thoughts about like these different different ways at looking at old things. Especially he would do it in pop culture, but in this he's looking at the church. But like including all of that analysis and marrying that with just like the dumbest fucking humor, like a poo-poo demon.
Yeah.
So like this is I just finished rewatching it and I was like, God damn, some of this doesn't age well, but a lot of it really does, and I fucking love it. It made I still laughed very hard at several parts.
Yeah, this movie is great. I think when I was growing up, also George Carlin was one of my favorite, if not my favorite comedians. I saw him. I met him like once when I was pretty young for like a book signing, and him being basically, other than like the opening scene where you see the three like hockey, which also I feel like is the perfect metaphor for like kids in New Jersey causing trouble, like skating around with like with hockey sticks, and then and then they have George Carlin come in. He's the what's his official character? He's the
Cardinal.
Cardinal. Yes, Cardinal Glick. And he comes in and he's just hilarity. And actually the full unedited scene that they cut is even funnier. It's like he goes on for a while. It's pretty damn funny. And I think it's perfect because he also hates organized religion. He jokes about it in his comedy. Couldn't have been a more perfect choice for me.
Yeah, Carlin is absolutely on fire in this movie. He like I think of everyone, he makes me laugh the hardest. It's just like if people could see that the Catholic Church has a little more panache, like this, like who. God, he's fucking perfect. Miss him.
I feel like he plays it well too because Carlin was like a devout atheist, right? Like, and was I think also raised Catholic himself. Like Carlin, just I assume Irish Catholic. Like, so this had to have a special irony and just a place in his heart to play this character.
Yeah, I don't know. I was looking. I don't think they had someone else in mind, but then they approached him and he's like, "I'll do this." And I told Mike the only stipulation was he had to wear his wedding ring. So they put a Band-Aid over it so you couldn't see it.
Oh,
because I think his wife had just died, and he's like, I don't want to take it off, which was pretty cool. And this movie, like you were saying, I think, well, Mike, you're saying it's like very well, or maybe you, Frank, saying it's like very well structured. It's like perfectly, each scene feels separate, but they like flow perfectly. So you have the little intro, the guy getting beat up, and then we have, George Carlin's little speech introducing you to like the joke of the Catholic Church, being like, we know you guys think we're kind of messed up, so we're going to try and be cool about it and have this buddy Jesus, which is just so funny. It's so funny. I'm not a Christian, but it's funny as shit.
Dude, I laughed out loud so hard when they pulled the cloth off of the Buddy Christ. And I've seen that thing. So I think I had that, like a little statuette of that in high school, and just seeing it again, so brilliant. The whole Catholicism wow campaign, like the Catholic Church is trying to revamp their brand. It's like Catholicism wow. And God, Carlin, it's like, doesn't it just pop Buddy Christ? It's amazing. I was like, wait, this happened before the like all of like the Boston was it the Boston Globe, the Boston Herald? Like
it was before that.
This was before that. So like this was at a time when the Catholic Church, where at least it was satirical to say that the Catholic Church needed a revitalization in its image, and this was before all of the like the priest like sex scandals came out, or not child sexual abuse, I should say.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. It's they and then I guess it makes it even funnier that he had like this idea floating, Kevin Smith like floating around, and it would have worked until that moment probably. It's still, I think it almost makes it even, is it funnier in the fact that happened? And then you're like, they really need some like revamping.
Absolutely. It's like he was predicting the future. It's great.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And so let me just say that this movie has maybe, if not the best cast you'll find in like any comedy movie. And according to that Charlie Rose interview, all the actors were paid scale. So no one made shit off this movie. Basically, the people just wanted to be in this movie, and that's how we got every actor you saw.
I've heard him talk about that, about his sets. I think it's just because he never got like big budgets, so it was a lot of getting his friends. I'm sure Affleck and Damon had a lot to do with getting people in the movie. I never actually found out how they all became friends, like Kevin Smith, Affleck, and Damon, because they're like in pretty much all of his early stuff, or at least Affleck is for sure.
That's true. I don't know. I didn't look into that, but you said budget. This movie cost $10 million.
Jesus.
and it made 44 million, which isn't a lot, but in 1999 for like a kind of a this kind of humor or comedy movie, it's pretty good, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it has, the cast is phenomenal. It has Ben Affleck, like you said, Matt Damon. It has Janine Garofalo, who apparently was also floated as being the main person in this movie. Was supposed to be Bethany, but she wasn't. She was big at the time. You had Alan Rickman, of course, R.I.P.
Yeah.
George Carlin too. Yeah. So Salma Hayek, who Chris Rock. I mean,
Chris Rock. Chris Rock.
That was actually.
Okay,
Sorry, just real quick. My first impression of the movie was just how much babies Matt Damon and Ben Affleck look like, but then also just to see George Carlin and then to see Alan Rickman made me sad. But continue, Frank. Sorry.
No, I know. Yes, they're so young, especially Affleck and Damon. But I was just gonna say, Chris Rock is like on this watch. I was like, he's very good in this. Like he's very compelling. I also think this is like maybe my favorite on screen Affleck and Damon together. And I'm not even just saying that as a fan of this movie and Kevin Smith. Like they're really good and they play off of each other very well, and like the characters are like very interesting. Like I don't give a shit about them in The Duel or Air or any of that stuff. I mean, maybe Good Will Hunting, but I love them in this movie.
You can tell that they are like not acting, almost like they're just like two friends that are just, they're talking about like being angels and being expelled from heaven, which, as we'll probably talk about some, but that's basically the plot of this movie, is that Loki and Bartleby have been sent out of heaven, and they live in Illinois, right?
Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin, right. They go, Bethany lives in Illinois. You're right. And so they basically have to live the rest of their lives there, but they find a loophole, which we see in the opening scene, where they get where Bartleby, which is Ben Affleck, gets like a little newspaper clipping about this church opening, which will allow them to find a loophole in God's, from God, so they can now go into heaven, which we later find out will unmake humanity and destroy everything, which I think is another interesting aspect to this. But I think the whole like plot hinges on the fact that basically God's is not always right. And and by not always right, I mean might not exist. Well, the whole thing. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know what you guys think of about
God.
No, that's not for this podcast, perhaps. But just like the interweaving of like religious, like that as like the religious backdrop of the whole movie, like as former, or I guess still existing Catholics, like how does that play off of like what you might have learned as like kids about, I don't know how to ask this question.
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, but Frank, if you have something, I'll let you go first.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, the stuff that we learned at least in my church going experience, the stuff that I was taught and learned was it was very boring. It was very dry. A lot of it was fire and brimstone. A lot of it was like, we're judging the shit out of you always, all the time. That's kind of the big one. That's like the Catholic thing, is like, you should feel bad about every single thing that you do. And not only should you feel bad, someone is watching you do it. So it was really cool seeing someone like flip a lot of these concepts on their head and question them. And I think he does a really brilliant job as he's introducing these different characters to kind of come in with these different perspectives and specific criticisms about the church and specifically about the Bible and the way that it like portrays women, the way that it has written off people of color, the way that beliefs in religion have led to wars, all of these different things. And it's so it attacks a lot of the things that I already knew, but just like kind of took them at a different angle. And there's also a lot of shit that I never knew, that I like literally learned from this movie. Like I didn't know that there were different choirs of angels that like had names. I didn't know that there were these different types of demons, floating around. I didn't know
there was a ship monster.
There was a ship monster. Yeah, all these things. So it was like, yeah, just it allowed me to start questioning stuff, is what it did. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I mean it's super clever. Like you're dead on. Like the way that he makes a bunch of new criticisms and finds inventive and funny ways to do that. It's obviously just like a great movie for that reason. The term I couldn't think of earlier was plot device. How Kevin Smith
Mm.
uses like a lot of different dogmatic scriptures and things and contradictions in scripture as plot devices, which is cool. Like I think one of the major things that this movie hinges on, like you were saying, Evan, is that there's like a line in the Bible that says like what God holds true in heaven or what man holds true, something like if a priest makes it a rule, it becomes a rule in heaven, which is why he can like just decree that archway to the church forgives people of all their sins and will let these guys into heaven if they die right after. It's like one of those loopholes. And Frank, I don't know if you ever were like put in through like the catechism school. It's like you would have to like if you're a Catholic, you usually had to go to like some extra classes on like weeknights or something before sacraments to like teach you about Catholicism and everything. And like you were saying, it was a lot of fire and brimstone. But I don't know if you guys had this experience there, but a lot of ours kids there would try to like figure out loopholes. Like, there was always a lot of like asking questions like, well, can my dog go to heaven? Like, can I go to heaven if I do this? Like, what if I do that? What if I do this right before I do that? Like, just like this movie is trying to do, like situations like that. And I think that there are a lot of situations like that which pull people out of their faith too, which is why this movie could be dangerous for people once you start to see the obvious holes in the plots there. Like,
Mhm.
it really can just. I think that's what's cool about this thing. Is like you kind of realize people are spending a lot of time and energy writing a lot of stuff about literal bullshit. So it's just
Yeah.
funny.
I the last thing I'll say is I like when I was growing up, both my parents were raised Catholic. But like by the time they were adults, they didn't really give a shit. But my mom was the one who was like, she was like, I don't agree with everything that the church does, but you need to get confirmed just in case.
Hmm.
Like, just in case the rules are true. I just want to make sure we have our bases covered so that you can get into heaven at a later date. And I was like, all right, fine, I will do that just for your peace of mind.
Well, it's funny what you said, Mike. It reminds me of like those Simpsons episodes, I think early on in the show, where their parents are at church and they're like in the basement, like in the church school, and Bart keeps asking all these ridiculous questions, like, if I do this, will you get into heaven or hell? And it like that sounds like that's actually accurate. It's like what kids are doing, and
Oh,
that makes
100%.
that's funny.
I mean, literally one of the things that brought me out of being religious, because I was like probably as an early teen, pretty devout because they had instilled it in me, and then I was like starting to have like hormones, and I'm like, oh, this is problematic. This is gonna be an issue. um, and so obviously I came out of it for the better without the religion. But like my grandmother at one point had this necklace, and she swore that it was like this blessed charm that if you like died with this on you, you would go to heaven, like regardless of your sins and regardless of like, I mean, in the Catholic religion, like you have to go to confession, hopefully before you die, because if you have any mortal sins on your soul, like if you like miss a mass and don't go to confession afterwards, and then you die, like sucks for you. Like it doesn't matter if you were like a great Catholic, like you could have been Mother Teresa. You're going to hell, bro. Like sucks, but like there's a bunch of like weird loopholes like that for better or worse. And this necklace that apparently my grandmother said was one of them. I'm like, well, this kind of invalidates all religion. Like, why should I bother doing anything if I could just like wear this fucking necklace? Like, thanks, grandma, I appreciate it, but like this also means that like this is very obviously all bullshit.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Evan, do you mind if I asked what, if any, denomination you were raised in?
Jewish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I went to like the equivalent of that, like Hebrew school confirmation type of thing, and it's the same thing, just a different God of doing, like, there isn't hell in the same kind of sense. It's more, it makes it seem like everything is all like forgiving, in a
Mhm.
sense. So that's why it's interesting to watch this movie. As I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people watching this movie are not religious or not of Catholicism, so it's just interesting to see it from someone who grew up that way. That's why I find it's
Hmm.
fascinating to me. But yeah,
It
so
also
the
is funny. So just real quick, a quick point that Frank made that I thought was really good, that it brings out a lot of things that even most Catholics never know about. Like there's a lot of things in this movie that really the real freak Catholics like that they really would even have any kind of concern about. And definitely things I found out of it because of this movie, like you were saying too, Frank. But sorry,
Hmm.
go ahead, Evan.
Oh no, yeah, no, you're good. I was just gonna say like the I feel like there's many funny scenes in this movie, but the opening scene where Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, Loki, and Bartleby are like having their conversation about this is just
So
everything
good.
about it, like them walking through the airport on the little like moving walkway, it's beautifully constructed and shot. Everything about it is just funny, and every line, I feel like in Kevin Smith movie, especially this one, is like not a single line is wasted.
Mhm.
Like every line like kind of fits, and sometimes it's a little wordy, but I think that's what makes it so good.
And you don't like in rewatching it. I mean, I've seen this movie so many times, I understand what the context is now. But like rewatching that scene specifically, it's like you're introduced to Matt Damon first, who is speaking to a nun, and
Yes.
he is essentially convincing her to give up the cloth. He is like, this is why religion is bullshit. Like, it's just fucking duping people into basically getting shucked like oysters. And he successfully convinces this nun to give up her nunhood. And then like it moves right to him and Affleck's like, you know that there's a God. You've been in his presence. Yet I just heard you say to this woman that there is no God. And David's like, I just love fucking with the clergy, man. I love keeping those guys on their toes. It's like and then it goes on and they start explaining the loophole in the arch in the church and like all of these things. And when you're first watching, like it's hard to keep up. You're like, wait, why has he been in the presence of God? Why doesn't Ben Affleck have an anus? Like, why are like they haven't explained any of these things yet. It's really, that's why I was really impressed on this rewatch. I was like, damn, this is like well structured. Like he's not holding the audience's hand. He's like very much just being like, we're going, the action is happening, and you're gonna have to like figure it out.
Yeah, it is mildly complicated for like a comedy, but as you see, you're like, oh, everything makes sense. And like I said, like I think it's nice how they flash each character you're getting intro to's name. So you have Loki and you have Bartleby, and then I think you get switched over to Bethany, she lives in Illinois, is where I messed up the name. She lives in McHenry, Illinois, for whatever reason they chose that location, and she's basically a devout Catholic, continuing to go to church, but also works at the Planned Parenthood, which I think is also a hilarious like poking fun at this. Like she's very religious, doesn't miss mass, but then she goes to work with Janine Garofalo at the Planned Parenthood. No holes barred.
I thought that scene was cool because it's the two of them in the break room having like a crisis of faith, like just talking about being in I guess their early 30s or something, and they're supposed to be like young single women in the 90s or whatever. And this scene struck me as like such a pre 9/11 scene because it's like, I guess that's the crisis people were going through then. It's like, oh no, is religion really fake? We're out here just out on our own. Whereas like now, if you talk to like Gen Z, God forbid, like you ask them their feelings on religion, like they will literally just laugh at you. It's like I get the feeling that like the discourse among the younger generations is so much more nihilistic and hopeless that the problems of the generation pre 9/11 just seemed like just laughable in comparison.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. It does. It's like a very mundane problem as opposed to like paying rent, eating, and late stage capitalist hellscape. This is just, oh, I don't really believe in God anymore.
I think what does it is that like she has a job that seems like comfortable. They never question it. She has a car that looks like, I guess, just like shitty, but it's fine. But like her apartment looks like chill. Like it's just never mentioned. Like there's no mention of like suffering and poverty or like material conditions, which is just like almost like a given for like the struggles of like, I think what's portrayed in movies, or unless it's just like, never mind. I could be off base because it can also just be totally ignored in movies the way they brush over and just assume that everyone is like the upper middle class or something in certain aspects.
Yeah, she doesn't really address like where she's at materially in her life. It is just like it's solely just like a crisis of faith. It's kind of like how in rom-coms it's just like our jobs are never the problem. It's just that we can't find love.
Yeah, I mean her biggest thing is even that her husband left her as well.
Right. And actually, in the deleted scenes, they deeply extend the part at the Planned Parenthood. I won't like go into it, but someone comes in who wants to, I think, get an abortion, and she basically walks her through why she can't have children and why her husband left her. And it's like very depressing and very serious. And I think definitely took away if they kept it. It was like a good 5 minutes long in the movie. And so they've removed it because they kind of hint to it, like how her husband had left her. She couldn't have children, I believe. And then we find out at the very end that she's pregnant because God gives her an immaculate conception or of some sort, and so she can have a baby. But that was part of why her crisis of faith thing was she couldn't have children or find love. So it's like the added top of that too. But I think it's right that in almost any movie, it's just assumed until recently that everyone is just comfortable, like their life is fine.
But the movie does pass the Bechdel test just from that scene in the break room alone.
It does, and that's one thing I wanted to mention about this movie in general is that I think maybe you said, Frank, is that the church is not considered to be very progressive. There's not people of color and Latino and other women in the Bible or any of these things as far as good characters. But this movie not only brings that up, but it has a black apostle in Chris Rock. They have the Muse, which is Salma Hayek, a Latina, and they have strong female characters is the main character of the whole thing. So I think it's also a pretty cool flipping on its head of religion and them having all these strong because the main character could have been a dude.
Sure.
And he didn't do that. I think he should be appreciated for that.
I agree. It's I definitely agree that the way that he wrote a lot of the characters and cast a lot of the characters was definitely progressive for this time, for that time, and pretty radical in what he was suggesting and being Chris Rock was one of the 13 apostles,
and Jesus was black,
and Jesus was black. Yes, that's a huge part of once Chris Rock shows up, he's oh, I'm here not only to tell you about me, but to tell you all that actually Jesus was black, which was I remember hearing that at the time and being whoa, I didn't even think about that he might have not been a white guy. I feel it's pretty commonly understood now by non-super traditional Catholics that if Jesus did in fact exist in some form, human or otherwise, that he most certainly was not a white person, bopping around the Middle East 2,000 years ago. So... he was ahead of the curve on that. The one place that I get conflicted because it's something I noticed in Kevin Smith's writing as I get older is that he's clearly not an outward misogynist in that he doesn't clearly doesn't hate or want to disrespect women, but goes at lengths in his jokes and in his dialogue to talk about how fucking stupid men are and how much shit women have to put up with men. But at the same time, half of this movie is Jay just trying to sleep with Bethany. And that's the thing that it's just I get it. It's you're playing off of the fact that this is just a dumb horny guy who just can't stop running his mouth, but Bethany's always at the butt of that joke. So that's kind of the part where I'm this kind of sucks watching it now. Yeah,
that is true. He definitely that's really his entire character in this whole movie. So we have to get there. The only other character I think we didn't mention, or the two other characters is Azrael, who is from hell, and he comes up and he's played by Jason Lee, which I think he apparently was originally going to be Bartleby, but he had a scheduling conflict, and so they only could slide him into a small role, which I'm thank God, because I think the movie is for the better. Even though I like Jason Lee, it's better this way. And then you have Alan Rickman, who plays the character I can never pronounce, the Metatron, right? Which I didn't know what that was, but I think is intentionally the joke too, you don't even know who I am, let me show you my wings and all this shit, you still don't know who I am. So that's basically the kind of the two sides. You have hell, and you have the angels that are from heaven, and then you have the humans, and I feel they're all interacting, and you have to prove to any of the humans that this is real. We have to show the humans what we can do, what we know, to prove that religion exists. And the only way to actually prove that religion exists is literally come down from heaven and show you yourself. So it's almost another kind of stab at religion too, is the people don't believe it, or if they do, they believe so blindly. Bethany just assumes that God exists until she sees the Metatron and believes it for real. I don't know.
Yeah, it's that's why that's why when like I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but like when Bartleby Ben Affleck has his turn and basically like goes off the deep end and decides that he does want to. He learns that because like him and Damon are under the auspices that like if they do this loophole and get back into heaven, then they'll just get back into heaven. They're unaware that their reentry will literally unmake existence. So.
Right.
But at some point he finds out because they encounter Bethany on the train and she tells him like, "Hey, I'm being sent to this place to kill these angels." Like she doesn't know they're them. And then he like basically has like a break, like a mental break, and is like, and his rant to Loki in the parking lot, I was like so resonant to me, where he's just like talking about how like God basically made the angels to serve, but then like has shown humans infinite patience. I was just like, that's such an interesting, like, that's such an interesting perspective. I wouldn't even consider it because he's right. Because he's like, he's talking about how shitty humans are and how we've just squandered all of the gifts that we have been given. Like, I don't think it's any surprise. I don't believe in God at this point, but like how we have destroyed this planet, how we had, like just don't, how we kill each other constantly. I was like, fuck, this is probably how an angel would think if they existed.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, there is like a breaking point for them, and one of my other favorite. Well, and they also refer to Bethany as her character as like the last scion, like humanity's last hope for stopping them, which they never really. They partially kind of explain why she's chosen, but it's sort of, I don't know if they feel like it's like explicit. I think there's a scene like we're in the woods later, and the Metatron, Alan Rickman's character, is kind of explaining it to her why she's chosen. And I don't know. Did I miss something? Did they?
No, that's what happens. She runs into the river because she's like,
I
fucking
can't do
just
this.
yeah. She can't. She gives up. She's like just what do you call it? Having a meltdown about the whole thing. And of course, that scene's like like a second baptism, right? Like he gets
Right.
her out of the lake and he's like, no, you're actually going to be
Oh wow.
God's servant, but also what you always were. Like just add this new data to your personality or like to what you already know of yourself as who you are. So I mean, that was I think the turning point where she decides that she's gonna go do it. Um, but I like that just I don't know because right after that I think is when they get into the bar and that's when Azrael shows himself and he starts fighting with them. He kills the bartender. He makes the holy bartender joke. Like he does play that whole role like very over the top. Like I like him in all of Kevin Smith movies and everything I've seen him in, but he definitely plays this like as smarmy as possible the whole time. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it fits. It fits for like being a demon. Like I don't know. Somehow that I guess
Yeah.
that seems fitting. And it's also just I guess for the time it works really well. But that's when like you start to see again. There's more of like the scripture used as plot devices. But I think again that's what's so clever about what he does with this movie is like that there are some rules he could exploit for the good guys to just win at any point. Like obviously they could just like it's funny because I think Frank you were saying at the beginning like they teach you that you're always being watched and judged and everything by these spirits. And Chris Rock even says, like, the dead always watch the living, especially in the shower and everything. And the Jay, what's a Jay, not Silent Bob, he says, yeah, I can't wait to be dead. Because, of course, he's just the stereotypical horny guy the whole time. But so, of course, like, why can't they find out who the convalescent god is that's on life support in the hospital, who also happens to be the one that they're trying to raise funds for in the Catholic Church to keep him alive, like because they oppose euthanasia on all circumstances, even though it would literally save humanity. Of course, it's like the key irony. But
It's true.
yeah, they don't use that kind of plot device where they had that all knowingness in that circumstance, of course. But again, it's just how it works. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the ultimate religious irony, I feel like, where, yes, if he was all knowing, all fallible, he could pass this to like the voice, right? Like the voice of God seems to know. That's also one thing that I thought that I got the sense of was that Alan Rickman's character might have known, but it needed to be Bethany to like uncover this. Like somehow like religion couldn't step in. Like we created you, but we're not gonna step in and mess with anything, which is kind of like the whole thing with that scene in the parking lot you're talking about, Frank, where God is kind of like letting people do whatever they want. He doesn't really interfere with anything. You have to just learn on your own. And so I think all the characters kind of seem to have to come to some realization. Even like Jay and Silent Bob, like near the end, I feel like have this a sense of like purpose or understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I chalk it up a little bit to just kind of like movie bullshit, like it took Bethany all of 2 seconds at the end to be like, oh wait, that guy on life support, was he near a boardwalk? Oh my god, that is
The hospital's
God.
right next to the church.
Yeah, like I feel like all of the choirs of angels could have put their heads together and figured that one out. But yeah, I think that's just just some movie bullshit, but like some pretty good ones, because like again, the assault on God we learn later in his human form is the first scene of the movie, and you're just like, I have no idea what the hell is happening. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know why the fuck these kids are beating him up. And then it's just like little breadcrumbs, and then yeah, you find out that was just God chilling, playing some skee ball.
One of I know we kind of like one of my favorite scenes in this movie. There's a lot of hilarious ones, but I think maybe the two that are, I guess, kind of in a row is when Azrael and Bartleby are on the bus going to the church, but then they're going to make a stop at the movie headquarters. And I feel like both of those scenes, like the one on the bus is hysterical. He shoots the dude because he's an adulterer for, with his gun that he acquired very easily at the shop, apparently, at the gun shop. And then he goes to the movie headquarters and he just murders all but one of the people. And I think I made a meme on TikTok a few months ago. I think maybe right after we were talking about doing this movie. And it's the scene where like the golden calf is basically like capitalism. And there are all these people like holding it up to esteem. Like this is their God. Like the movie idol, it was just the idea of like ultimate wealth and prosperity to these rich assholes, sitting around a table. Being horrible people.
Except for the one. I thought it was really funny that she was there. It's like, how did she get to be in the boardroom of the idolaters if she didn't do anything wrong? Like even just her efforts in the company for the idolatry, like that should put her in the category of like getting murked with the rest of them. I don't know why it doesn't, but I think it's obviously movie bullshit. It's funny. I think it's fun.
But she didn't say God bless you.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I think it's telling that like it's the one woman in the boardroom full of men that Bartleby and Loki were like, you're the only good one here. We will spare you.
Yeah, I guess I think it was like an attempt to just show like a mild aspect of like God's mercy to like, we're going to make an example out of all you, and we're going to save you to, tell everyone not to keep doing this stuff. Or something. And again, you're right. It's like movie. It's funny. It's very, that whole scene is very funny. And then he like gives her the gum while she's like got blood all over her face.
I will say, I think that the scene on the bus is more succinct and more clever than the whole scene in the boardroom. Like it's cooler in the boardroom. It's bloodier. It's like, it's a very movie scene. Whereas the one on the bus is just like, he just sees the two people making out. They're so passionately making out in public like that. And then he just interrupts them and says, are you married? They're like, yeah, what business of yours? And he's like, wait, to each other? And he's like, no. But the other one asked, right? I'm trying to remember the scene because I didn't see it.
I think he asked at the same time. I think both times Matt Damon asked him.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, to her? And he's like, not that it's any of your business, but no.
Hilarious. But that was just such a clever way to do that. I loved it.
Yeah, that scene is very funny. And I love that. And at the same time, I know maybe you said, Frank, when like Chris Rock is introduced into the movie, literally falling from the sky, like completely butt naked, and he's convincing, like gets Silent Bob's like jacket, which is also very funny. He's walking around, and they go to the movies, which I think the one thing about Kevin Smith movies, and especially in this one, is like the tie-ins. Like they had to going to the movies is just perfect. They're going to the because that's all that's left, and he like asked him Bethany what it is, and she explains the sandwich, which is like ridiculous. It's like a movie. I don't remember the exact words.
Egg and movie muffin.
Egg and movie muffin. There you go. And it's just like it's an egg muffin, whatever. But it's a movie one. It's just perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember when he introduced Mubi, but then like Mubi is like throughout the rest of his films.
I feel like it might have been in Chasing Amy, but they never had a location. Like they refer to it like, oh, I went to movies or something like that. But I don't know. But I think that the Chris Rock character, and also I think right after this, the Salma Hayek character being, like we said, the like a black man who was left out of the Bible as an apostle, kind of shows like that religion doesn't care about you if you're not a white dude. And I feel like he had some of like the most profound things to say, probably of any of the characters or any of the speeches throughout the movie. Of, like, we want to try and fix the Bible. We need you to help us do that. We need the people who are losing faith. Like, what would make you want to? We're going to crowdsource the Bible now, basically.
Yeah, I mean, he basically raises the idea of like, if people found out that Jesus was black, would they want to believe in him? Like, would Christianity, would Catholicism have become what it has become if everyone knew that Jesus was black to begin with? Probably not, just based on the way that racism has pervaded through the centuries.
True.
My favorite thing that Chris Rock says in this movie, and my favorite idea about religion that he posits in this movie is when they're on the train near the end, and Chris Rock is talking about how, like all these different religions, like no one's got it right, like everyone's fucking up, everyone, like, the Catholics, the Christians, like the Jews, the Muslims, like no one has figured it out. And he's like, because everyone like has these beliefs, and beliefs are hard to change. And like ideas are better because an idea you can change. Beliefs people will kill for, they will die for. And I was like, that's fucking beautiful. And you could you could apply that to anything other than just religion, like
Politics,
capitalism, whatever. Like people just like have these beliefs, these just like hard found beliefs, and they're just like, I would rather fucking die than even consider a different perspective than this. And I think that's like that's pretty powerful to me.
Do either of you guys happen to remember sorry, Selma Hayek's quote? There's some, I think they were sitting around the campfire, or maybe it was in the bar, and Selma Hayek says something about, they asked her like which religion had it right, and she said none of them had it right because they're all too self-righteous to realize that the point is. And then I literally walked away from the movie to like go do something else during that scene. So I don't remember how she finished that sentence. But I don't know if you guys happen to remember that quote. But one of the things
I was trying to find it.
I mean, it's no problem. I had something else I wanted to say anyway. But Frank, you had said early on in the show that he makes a lot of really good criticisms of religion from like a progressive angle, and I thought one of the best ones was like all the arguing they did over whether God is a man or a woman. And I thought that was like especially hilarious in retrospect, because they do a lot of pronoun play in the movie. Like they constantly are like calling God she or him or like whatever, and then like emphasizing it or like staring at each other when they do it to make a point of it, like depending on who is saying it or in what situation. And I thought that was really funny, especially like with everything that's transpired since then, and like how much of a deal obviously people make about pronouns now. But then obviously just in retrospect, the idea of thinking of like spiritual entities as like gendered, it's just really funny, especially like, I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And he was ahead of the times. He was like decades before Ariana Grande, like he.
What did Ariana Grande say? I don't know.
Oh,
I don't get that reference.
I think she has. I'm pretty sure it's her. The song "God Is a Woman."
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm too old, man.
Dog, I am 35 years old. I don't know how I even know.
Yeah, I can't, like, I have the script, but I swear sometimes like it's not the exact one. Sometimes I can't find. I know which line you're talking about, but I think it's to what you're both saying is, I think she specifically makes some comment about like how this is like she is in this body, that she like buys her body, right? Like that she's creates this herself that she wants to be, almost, right? The serendipity character Salma Hayek, I feel like she makes it known, right, that she like bought her beautiful body so she could basically just, this was the body she inhabited because she's not really,
because she's not a human. Yeah. She's a muse, inspiring artists, filmmakers specifically.
I also love the line where she's talking about she says all the movies that she had written except for Home Alone, and they're like, yeah, I don't know who like sold their soul to like make that one like do well, which I love that line. It's very funny. Like she's like written all the classic movies, and
a lot of John Hughes references in this movie.
There are a lot of John Hughes. I saw something about that where I can't remember, it was like one of the IMDb notes, but like they he apparently does that a lot in his movies, like sly little references, because they also kind of both created their own universe, which is also I think what you're talking about is where Jay and Silent Bob come to Illinois because they think that's the place where John Hughes movies all take place, which was such a hilarious thing that they like didn't look that up beforehand. They're just like, we're gonna go to this. How did they get a bus ticket to a place that didn't exist?
That's such a fucking brilliant just like reason that they're in Illinois. Just like all the John Hughes movies are set in Shermer, Illinois, so we're like, we're gonna go there and be the only dealers in town. Got here and was like, there is no Shermer in Illinois.
and there's lots of hot women because like in the movies they're all hot women, like not thinking that like it's just a movie, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very the ship monster too, I think is very funny. I always like how Silent Bob, Kevin Smith, like uses his character, like his whole thing of like not saying very much and having only like a few actions where he like sprays like the spray on the ship monster and it just like collapses, and then his only line in the movie is on the train when he throws him off and says the famous Indiana Jones line, which is no
Right.
ticket.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
I mean, yeah, he always loves like he loves media and movies and culture, and so I think his putting that into all of his movies is always awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually wrote down on my notes. I wrote that idea is better than a belief. So that was you got that one perfectly. And what was the other thing I was going to mention about? They also talk about like Jesus having like siblings and Mary Magdalene, like they like flip that around too, where like there's this whole structure of everything being wrong, but it's written by men, and I think that's what Selma Hayek's character says. Like it's been written by men to make women look bad and men look good, and it's like such another perfect like poking fun of the Bible using like scripture and, as you were saying, Mike, like to fold in those things.
Mm.
Yeah, that was an interesting critique. I'm sure that definitely made a lot of people. I mean, I'm trying to think if it made me think about that at the time when I saw it, because I don't remember how old I was when I even saw this movie, but I'm just assuming it was around that time that it came out. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that would have hit a lot of people hard, because it's like when there was a protest sign that I saw on probably a meme post forever ago, and it just said, "There are no white people in the Bible. Take all the time you need with this." And it was great because somebody just put that on a sign at a protest, and like, that definitely hits some religious white people right in the gut, because that thought had just never occurred to them. And then to even hear that, like, even if it's proposed in a Kevin Smith movie, it does kind of make sense that like maybe Joseph and Mary would have had other kids after Jesus, even if she's like conceived immaculately before that point. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a good fucking point.
It's a great plot device for sure. Like,
yeah, he's like, yeah, Mary had Christ without, through immaculate conception, but like her and Joseph were married. What do you think? They never had sex? Like that's just gullibility. Like
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, obviously, of course.
He really put in all those like things that people might have like had this thought in their brain, but like couldn't come to it, and like he pulled them out, like so that people like at the thing, like the protest sign, it's people weren't ever thinking of those things until someone like shoves it right in their face and like, oh, of course. And one funny joke, one thing I wrote down because I don't know what I was thinking, I said, is Ben Affleck's character in Mallrats also an angel? I don't know, like because he's like the asshole. I guess he doesn't have a character, right? It's the man from Fashionable Male.
Mm-hmm. Did he like beat up someone at some point? He like beats up. Does he get in a fight with someone?
He beats up Jason Lee. I think I think he does.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just wrote that down because it makes no sense at all, and it's just funny. I don't know if they're. And then so the end of this movie is quite funny in that also that Jay shoots off the wings from them. I guess it's from. Well, no, before I say that, is that Ben Affleck kills Azrael, not Azrael. Loki, and I found that kind of strange that he doesn't let him go through. Like he's had that moment you mentioned on the train where he's realized that this is going to destroy everything, but he doesn't tell him, right? He doesn't tell.
he doesn't tell Loki. So yeah, he basically has his own little essentially like a break, like a just he just goes off the deep end where he's like, oh, he's like, basically, I fucking hate God now. Not only do I want to prove them wrong, I want to unmake reality because fuck all of this.
So I guess killing him is only, it doesn't matter if he succeeds in some sense, right? Everyone is going
Yeah.
to, but it's almost like he wasn't with him in the end, so he has to knife him in the chest after he cuts off his wings.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great reversal because in the first part of the movie, like Damon is the one, like Loki is the one that's like, fuck these people. Like, I want to like kill more of them to get back on God's good side. And then by the end, it's totally swapped. And Affleck is the one who's like, no, like not only do I want to kill all the humans, I want everyone to not exist ever again.
If everyone's gonna suffer, I'm gonna make everyone suffer.
Mm-hmm.
He's like sees the thing, and the last scene is very I don't know if funny is the right word. It's very strange. Alanis Morissette playing, God coming down, and
one of the best pieces of stunt casting of all time, like absolutely brilliant. Because when God is finally revealed at the end of the movie, it is played by like the actual Alanis Morissette, and it's just like fucking awesome. It's great.
Are you saying that it's ironic? Sorry. We can just cut.
I liked it, Evan. It's fine.
All right. But I saw who was supposed to play her, but it didn't work out. Like they actually wrote the character for someone else. I'm trying to find who it was. Yeah, there's lots of things that they wanted. They wanted Danny Elfman to write the score to this movie, but he wasn't available, which, okay. They also wanted to have Samuel Jackson instead of Chris Rock, was another potential piece, which would have been interesting. Like I think it was just Shannon Doherty wanted to play Bethany, but they didn't invite her to try out because she was in Mallrats.
That's right.
They also offered Albert Brooks the role of the Glick instead of George Carlin first, which
that also would have been very good. But I think Carlin is just so.
Yeah, I'm glad it was Carlin.
Yeah, agreed. I can't find who it was supposed to be. I guess it doesn't really matter, but I think the end of the movie is very like when God wants to come down and do something, because like Bethany saves her. I guess they make God a her. That's another thing too, is throughout the movie they refer to God as a him. Almost every single person except Salma Hayek's character.
Salma Hayek, yeah.
Right.
And then Bethany starts referring to God as a woman.
Right. And so I wonder why I was thinking about why they would do that throughout the movie. And I guess it's like a reveal in a sense, but also like that everyone just assumes that God is a man because, it can only be a man who could do all this. But then they throw Alanis Morissette at you.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because Alan Rickman is one of the ones I was remembering. He like insistively says him and like he in like one of the scenes, and he like pointedly looks at somebody else who had been using, and then right again uses she/her pronouns for God right after that. And I thought that was like really funny. I didn't really get what the point even was in that scene, other than to just insist from Alan Rickman, who's supposed to be the character who's like closest to God, like literally the voice of God. That God's a man. And I thought that was like just a really kind of odd insistence on that part. I don't know.
It's also interesting too, is that all of the angels and whatnot, they don't have parts really. Like the angel, like Alan Rickman, like pulls down his pants in that like hilarious scene where it's like he's like a Ken doll underneath. But then they have a gender role assigned to God, which is interesting. Also, with like Salma Hayek isn't technically human, so she doesn't have one, but they're assigning a role to God. I don't know. We don't need to go down that, but I thought it's interesting.
It is. I feel like if Kevin Smith were writing this movie today, because I mean, he's like, he's I think for the most part is like a smart progressive dude. I haven't loved a lot of his recent films, but like, he's always been forward thinking. He's definitely not like a hateful person. Anything's like, I remember when all of the Weinstein stuff came out, he like was one of the few people who like profited from Weinstein, who was like, oh, I'm like giving away all of my money from this shit. Like he like actually like put his money where his mouth was.
Yeah.
So I feel like if he was writing this movie today, the conversation would be like, God doesn't have a fucking gender. There is no gender. Like
Yeah.
why are you so hung up on gender? It doesn't matter at all. They, he, she, it, whatever. Fucking it doesn't like. I feel like that would be the 23 version.
Yeah. I guess in this, it's like the progressive idea in 1999, kind of almost ahead of his time, would be like, you think God's a dude? No, it's not. So I think that's in
Right.
itself, I guess, is probably like the progressive jump for 24 years ago. So I can't fault him. I think he made a pretty respectably progressive movie for the time pre 9/11.
I'm trying to think of like how many movies have even personified God since then. It's like, what is it, like Evan Almighty, and made it like Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
But I think like the move is usually, if movies since then, they probably have just portrayed God as like a spirit, so never has like personified form, never needs to have a gender to begin with, or they just never
Right.
spend that much time. But I am wondering who's going to be the brave filmmaker to make God a trans person, like the first person to do that in a film and really piss off all the right wingers, because that will really get their goat, and I can't wait to see it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it could be. I could see like, well, the Matrix movies don't have, I don't know, the Wachowski. They could do it maybe as, I don't know.
It'd be great. I would
Have
love
they
to see
done
it.
what movies have they done recently other than like the Matrix movies? Have they done any recently?
Cloud Atlas a few years ago.
Mm.
Did I freeze?
Speed Racer, which wasn't very good, as far as I remember.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
Did you, at the end of this movie, or like throughout like the overall message of this movie, because something that I really respect, admire, I don't know, about this movie specifically is that like he's very, very critical, but of religion, of like specifically organized religion and the rules it entails. But it also is like somewhat like respectful and celebratory of faith in general. I'm curious, as like, I don't know, as Marxists, as like people in this at this stage in human societal development, like, is that enough? Like, is it enough if or is it okay if someone allows their faith to just be faith and not to be something like hateful or exclusionary? Or do you think that like religion on the whole is problematic? Because I really don't know. I do have some like dear friends who are like still religious. They're like wonderful, loving people who like ideologically are pretty much aligned with us. But they're like, yeah, I still go to church because I love the community there. And I'm an atheist at this point, and I can't like I like wholly disagree with like the concept of religion, but I also can't like go the step farther and be like, you guys are wrong about that, or like my friends, like you are wrong. I'm curious, just as like leftist, as Marcus, like how do you feel about it?
That's a hell of a question to ask towards the very end.
Right at the end.
Yes.
I mean, I definitely take it on a case-by-case basis, but if somebody tells me or just even intimates to me that they're religious, I am immediately suspect that they're going to be a bigot. And I then have to like act differently about them or around them, because I don't know like what their beliefs are. Like, I just assume they're probably kind of racist and maybe a little homophobic. And if I didn't know them well enough to know that those things were not the case beforehand, before finding out that they're religious, I feel like it would have come up. Like, trying to think of how long I would have to know somebody before they make a comment saying that they are devoutly religious. But yeah, I mean, there are some people who are religious and they just don't see a problem with anyone who is different than them. It's just that those are so few and far between that it definitely does make me immediately suspect of people who are religious. But yeah, I mean, I would say it definitely has a problematic nature, especially in this country, because it's been so co-opted and enmeshed with fascism and just right-wing rhetoric. But
Sure.
that can definitely be a situation that's pretty much unique to white Western countries, I think.
Yeah, I think too is you might be able to say that someone is like extremely religious, which I could see could be suspect, but then you could also like have faith where like you may not necessarily be like a devout Christian or a devout Jew or Muslim, but just have like a belief in some I don't know if it is possible to separate from being like I'm very religious to just like I have faith in something. I don't know what it is, and I can still have these beliefs because I see occasionally like on online. There's a person on TikTok who's I think his name is like Orthodox Marxist. He's like a religious person and he's a Marxist, and I don't always agree with some of the things he says, but generally speaking, like it's similar-ish, I guess you could say. So
Mm.
I guess it's possible. I don't want to say like offhand anyone who's religious, but I'd have to go a little deeper and see.
That's totally fair. Yeah, especially today, the connotation of saying like I am religious, or like especially like you were saying, Mike, in the U.S., in the like especially in the evangelical community, that it carries like a very negative, like rightfully earned negative.
There's some baggage.
Yeah, some negative connotations these days.
And then at the same time, like if someone was like very religious as a Jew, you probably would. They probably are. They could be Zionists, in which case
Sure.
I would very much likely disagree with them. You know, I have some family members who are Zionists, and I just don't talk about that or make sure they don't see anything I post online. And generally, I like kind of stay away from that topic purely just for like this irrational fear that like that they'll find my content and see this, and I don't know, including my own mother.
My one last question regarding religious, like literal dogma, is Chris Rock and his character pointed out that they don't talk about Jesus from 13 to 33. And I thought that was really funny because I've never even tried to ask any devoutly, like people who claim to read the Bible or maybe actually do, like what it says about Jesus during that time period, because that's like a legit question that I had. And I think that I got from this movie. And I'm kind of curious. I'll probably like Google it after this to see like what Catholics actually say Jesus was up to at that time. But Kevin Smith definitely takes advantage of that gap in biblical knowledge to use for a great plot device, which I like.
Well, I'll just say one thing, and you can maybe speak to it. Is like you think of 13 is also like when a Jewish person would be bar mitzvahed, and like isn't he was supposed to be like a Jewish carpenter?
Yeah.
So presumably
Jesus was a rabbi, wasn't he?
I don't know if he was a.
I thought like canonically he was supposed to be like a rabbi and he was like Jewish, and then because of him that like changed the Jewish faith is like how it's supposed to work. I don't know.
I don't remember that, but I just know that I thought that he had been bar mitzvahed as a 13-year-old, but I didn't really know that much about this gap. I just Googled it and there's like countless articles about like what happened to the missing theory. Like you could probably spend the rest of your like month like reading books about this, I'm sure. It says like he had a walkabout, he just kind of like wandered and like
Crocodile Dundee.
Had his,
so I don't
had
know.
his Rumspriga before he had to go start saving people.
People also claim there's like a secret in the Vatican, like hidden somewhere where, you know, they'll make like what's those books with Tom Hanks, like make a book about it or something.
Oh, Da Vinci Code? Hell yeah.
Yeah, they could just have one because there is one about like the lineage of Jesus. I think that's the first one. And so presumably people believe that. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of myth has been spun up from, I mean, maybe the guy existed, but like, you know, someone took it and was like, we can run with this. This is good branding, this guy. Like we could put a spin on this. And I think that's a lot of where it came from, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. Any funny scenes that we didn't talk about that you want to mention? I feel like there's some that we didn't maybe mention.
I wanted to quickly mention the kids cutting a hole in the universe with the hockey stick when they need to teleport. That was a quick little plot device I liked.
Yeah.
I did realize in watching this that I for sure wore the hoodie inside of a blazer look for like early college because of this movie. I was like, oh, that's where I got that from, because like that was my fucking look, baby. I was like,
apparently the hoods that Bartleby and Loki were wearing were supposed to be their halos.
Okay.
It's like they didn't want to. They had no. I guess they could have had caps on or something. Like, but yes, that was just their little thing. Yeah, everything about like the sets in this movie, like all of the clothing. I feel like everything is just
Except for Azrael's fedora, that didn't age as well. Made him look kind of douchey.
Yeah, and I like how they my one funny like part of this is when they like kill that woman for her house because it has like air conditioning. Like, do you have air conditioning in here? Central air in every room but the
That
bathroom.
was funny.
Pumping it up like they never had AC before. Yeah, there are also lots of funny jokes just constantly throughout this movie. It's lots of religious jokes, every other type, but yeah, I think it's aged decently,
Yeah, for the
not
time.
perfectly. Yeah,
And for the jokes.
yeah, nothing is overly like racist or homophobic or
No.
not like a normal John Hughes movie.
No, definitely not. No, other than Jay constantly trying to overtly sleep with Bethany. I think that's. I mean, there's a couple of like slightly homophobic jokes here and there.
Yeah,
but then there's also like some lines that are like completely non-judgmental of like gay couples at the time. So it's a little. It's the Kevin Smith thing where he's like, oh, I totally like love and accept gay people, but I also think it's okay to make fun of them. You know, which is like just like a very like 90s white guy thing.
Yeah, it's definitely of the time, better than a lot of the movies at that time for sure. Like there's some terrible movies at the time.
That scene in the break room when Jeannie Garofalo and Linda Fiorentino are having their religious crisis, and Linda Fiorentino says like she's so miserable since her husband left, and Jeannie Garofalo says, "You thinking about switching teams?" And then her only response to that is, "Oh, women are crazy." And I was just like, "Whoa!" Because I was literally just thinking as that scene was happening, right before she said that, this scene passes the Bechdel test. Like they're not talking about men; it's two women talking together. Like these are main characters in the movie. This is great. And then she says that, I was like, "Oh, damn, fuck!"
They almost they just got there and then
they
fell off. Yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen this in a while and you don't have the DVD, there is actually a cut on YouTube that puts all of the deleted scenes where they belong. Like they cut all of them from the DVD, I guess, and then put them in. It's makes the movie almost 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is like 50 minutes, I think, of deleted scenes, which is a lot. And there's good commentary you can find on YouTube too from the DVD if you're into that sort of thing. Yeah, I don't know. Any final words about organized religion? No. Or about dogma? This dogma, not dogma, dogmatic, whatever.
Still love it. Still one of my favorites. Very appreciative to this movie. Came to me at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for asking me to be on. I had no idea you were even going to talk about this one, and then you asked me like the last minute yesterday. And I was like, "Damn, I forgot how much I loved that movie until I like watched it again today." And I was actually planning on getting on here tonight without having like watched it in preparation. I'm like, I think I remember enough about that movie, and I was so fucking glad I put it on because it's a dense movie. Like you were saying, Frank, it is very well structured. There's a lot going on. Like you definitely need to like watch it again to check up on it, but it's great.
Yeah, they definitely layer a lot. They definitely make it complicated-ish for a movie like that, but I think it comes out all right. And yeah, no, I'm glad you could join. I had asked another buddy to join Frank and I, but they're like, well, I don't know if I really like that movie. I'm like, wait, what do you mean you don't like this movie? Actually, but then I felt like you should come anyway because it would be more interesting. Because very rarely do I do a movie or have guests who don't like the movie, which I think is actually
what they say.
Yeah, except for Parasite, I think is the only movie where one of the three guests hated the movie, and it was made for some interesting commentary.
What? All right.
It's okay.
All right, now we're going to do a second part.
Yep. We listen to your Parasite episode and then talk about it.
Yeah, there could be. That's interesting. Like you could almost do the same movie, but with like people who hate the movie and people who like it, and it would be interesting to see how they would think.
Yeah,
I would listen.
Yeah. Anyway, Frank from Movies versus Capitalism, where you can listen to your podcast anywhere podcasts are available.
Yeah, all the podcast places.
And Mike will turn Leftist the same.
Same thing.
Where all the podcasts are available. They'll be linked down below. But Mike, Frank, thank you for coming on and talking some Kevin Smith Dogma.
Thanks so much.
Anytime. Thanks for having us, Evan.
All right. Well, you've been listening to Left of the Projector, and we will catch you next time.